Hello, and thanks for joining me again today. This is Brother Jamala, aka Brother Soldier 4D, and we said we want to talk about the topic of what is self hatred and is it consuming the African nations and the diaspora, the African continent and the diaspora. In lesson one, we covered a little bit about the doll experiment that was done in 1940 by the Board of Education, uh, Brown versus Brown, and we also talked about how the black children overwhelmingly selected the white doll as preferable for beauty and intelligence and good hair, etc. And so we know that that was a form of self hatred. Now, today we're going to talk a little bit more about this self hatred and maybe where it comes from or how it evolves. Now, these are highlights, so these are not detailed just for the sake of time that we have on this video and trying to get the information across. If we want to look into this in a deeper uh, a way, then we can do that in the future if people select to do that. So anyway, I have this divided into 3 points. The first point will be focused on the black child. The second point will be giving some kind of examples, and the third point is this consuming Africans on the continent and the diaspora. So when we want to look at self-hatred in the African, we want to focus on the child first. That's preferable. And the child, a lot of times, is socialized into society uh, where they receive, in their immediate people and the people that are closest to them, love, gratification. They get warmth and they get a lot of their identity by interacting with those closest to them. Um, if the parents are victims of uh, racial disparity or anything that causes them to feel inferior, then that can transfer onto the children. So, black self hatred is a process that is reinforced and it's also influenced by uh, those that are close to you. It could be friends, it could be family, anyone, and more so by anti-black images within institutions as schools, media, and churches. The black African child can be taught all of the positive characteristics of all other races, but nothing necessarily positive about themselves, especially of those in the diaspora that have been separated from the continent. Learning what is beautiful, smart, popular, nice, clean, acceptable, proper, he or she quickly understands the opposite, who is not filled with those same positive characteristics. However, if a black family has time in this day and age to teach their children to be able to combat these types of negative stereotypes that the children eventually internalize, they can achieve a sense of self-esteem in the child that's worthwhile. But the challenge of this would be, how do they feel about their collective self-esteem or about people of their own race outside of them? That's where the problem comes in. Like, you hear a lot of them say, I don't want to hang around a lot of, niggas today, or I don't want to be around a lot of black folk. I want to, it's the individual self-esteem will be probably intact, but the collective self-esteem is where the challenge is going to always be. Now, you can look at that child and say, does he or she have a healthy view of Africans or the African people? or African continent? Do they hunger or yearn to be with other blacks that look like themselves? Or do they feel the opposite? Point number 2 is an example. In the USA, I taught an elementary school at an elementary school in 2017 and introduced myself to a group of third graders. These were like ages 8 and 9. And I shared with them my travels in Africa, and one boy immediately said some negative remarks to me about the smell of Africa, the terrible diseases that people have, that they're eating people and drinking blood, and all these things that I don't know where this boy got this stuff from. And I attempted to correct this boy, and he had the nerve to turn his side to me and put his hand up. And he was stating that he no longer wanted to hear me, and he told me to stay away from Africa and him. And this was in the middle of a classroom. Now, knowing a guy like me would have turned that boy over my lap and gave him a 1, 2, 3 and sent him in the corner. But parents, a lot of times, are very sensitive to you correcting these children, and they will come up there, especially if it has to do with cultural issues, and they're in denial of their own African self. They have a sense of hatred. So you'll find this prevalent in the North America. Now, going in this same point, I'm still in point 2. In Africa, on the continent, there are also negative images transmitted by media and that demonize Black Africans in the diaspora, particularly America. And you'll see some of the attitudes of some of the Africans on the continent disassociating themselves with the Africans in the diaspora. And so these are attitudes that are basically transmitted in us over time because of the way we're socializing. A lot of times, in order to understand the Black male and female adult, you look at the child, their beginning, the beginning of their life when they're being shaped and socialized. Okay, so the third point is how, now that we have highlighted some of the causes of Black self-hatred, we can determine if this political condition is consuming the African nations by making it almost impossible to find common ground to struggle for mental as well as economic, social, and political freedom and equality. We must ask ourselves, who stands to gain when we are suffering like this? Who stands to gain? Us or people outside of us? Africans seeking to aid, we must also ask ourselves why Africans why we seem to support and aid in other people and other countries more so than ourselves, and even understand their history more than we understand our own history. We also must ask ourselves about the historical role that Africans on the continent played in selling their own brothers into slavery for pieces of silver, just like Judas, just selling their own brothers out in mass numbers compared to a lot of other civilizations and countries. We also have to look at why we seem to not, the Africans on the continent, not really give much of a voice to the brutality and the incarceration and the killing of Africans in the diaspora. Why is there minimal support or someone voicing, hey, come home, or we love you, you have a home to come to? Why do we leave our people out there as orphans? And we also need to ask ourselves, about the multiple coups that happened, the coup d'etats between, there's some of these men that have been overthrown, loved Africa. They loved their country and they loved their people, but they still were overthrown because there's some cases that puppets or people that are in cahoots with the some type of colonial masters or even other outside powers that aid them in helping to overthrow their present leaders. And we have to look at the exploitation of funds for struggling African communities and upholding religious images of European features and excessive collaboration with foreigners and educators that undermine the African education, land, and scholarship. And by this, there is a growing collective communal alienation alongside the external forces of neocolonialism that is, which in my strong opinion, is a major contributor to self-annihilation and continued destruction of many African communities and our people at large. To conclude, the spirit of the enemy within the minds of Africans is what we're dealing with. And this is very dangerous. And the battle for the mind of self-love is our only way out. There's an ancestor that says, man, know thyself. That's Imhotep. And there's some other, there's a book that was written called The Invisible Man. And that basically means that you don't count. You're not in any books, textbooks, especially in North America. You're not even talked about. They show no real contributions of what you've made to society. Just in the last maybe 10 years, they're starting to pick up that problem and start to, kind of talk about what Black accomplishments are out there. Let me see what my time is here. So anyway, wrapping this up, there is a scripture that I would like to share out of the Bible. And it talks about, in fact, I would like to read it. Let me see if my time looks like here. Okay, I have about 3 minutes. Okay. In St. John, chapter 10, verses 11 to 13. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd giveth his life for his sheep. But he that is an hireling, and not the shepherd, whose own the sheep are not, seeth the wolf coming, and leaveth the sheep, and fleeth, and the wolf catcheth them, and scattereth the sheep. The hireling fleeth, because he is an hireling, and careth not for the sheep. Now, the message to teachers, pastors, this has gone on too long. There will be a day that you will stand before the Creator for letting someone come and rob and scatter the sheep. And that goes for inside the house of worship as well as out here in the community. So I leave us with that, and we will have part 2 of this that'll get in more of the self-hatred and the dynamic of self-love. And we'll do a little more scripture on that. But I thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, put that on the channel, the YouTube channel, and also hit the thumbs up to say, hey, you liked it, or you need that. And God bless you. Thanks for joining us. Hotep.